What Survived the Sorting? Part 3 of The Mind Unbuilt by the Mercer Journal. The sorting is done. Two things remained after everything else came apart. The felt qualities of experience and the organizing process that determines what enters experience in the first place. Episode 2 ended there, not because the work was finished, but because the subtraction had gone as far as subtraction could go. This is where Episode 3 begins. One thing needs to be said plainly before going further. The subtraction doesn't prove a mechanism. What it does is establish the boundary conditions that any valid account must satisfy. We have drawn the shape of the whole. We haven't yet identified what fills it. That distinction matters, and this series will hold it carefully. What the method did. The field has spent centuries approaching consciousness from the top down. Here is what it is. Here is what produces it. Here is why physical process gives rise to felt experience. The definitions accumulated, agreement did not. The extraction approach went the other direction. Don't start with the definition, start with what can be functionally separated, and keep separating until separation becomes impossible. What remains when nothing more can be removed without the question itself dissolving? That is the target. The subtraction narrowed the target in a way definition alone struggled to do. Not because everything before was wrong, because a different angle became available. The centuries of accumulated description weren't wasted. They mapped the pile carefully enough that the pile could finally be sorted. The shape of what survived. What survived behaves less like a thing and more like a process. It has direction. Something is being organized, selected, foregrounded. Right now, hearing this sentence, certain signals are in the foreground and others are not. The temperature of the room is background. The meaning of these words is foreground. Something is doing that, not randomly, not passively, but in an organized and directional way. It has interiority. There is a felt quality to what gets organized. The words don't just arrive, they arrive as something. The foreground isn't merely designated, it is felt. There is something it is like to be reading this sentence rather than simply the mechanical fact of it. These two aspects, direction and interiority, appear inseparable. Every attempt to pull them apart in Episode 2 left something incomplete. Isolate the organizing process without the felt quality and you have selection with no interior, organization in the dark. Isolate the felt quality without the organizing process and you have experience without content, formless, undirected, without edge or object. Pull on either one and the other comes with it. This is not yet a mechanism. It is a description of what any mechanism would have to account for. That is the honest posture for this point in the series. The functional description. With that shape held clearly in view, we can describe how the residue appears to operate. Always remembering this remains description, not explanation. We are describing the apparent directionality of the process, not proposing an architecture. The residue behaves as though it receives. Not in the sense of a radio receiving a broadcast from an external tower. That metaphor imports too much architecture too quickly. But in the sense that the direction of the process runs from a field of available signal toward a point of interior focus. Attention operates as a vector pointing at something. What arrives at that point of focus appears inseparable from felt quality. Qualia appears tightly coupled to what enters that focus, not produced by it, not caused by it, but inseparable from it. This is apparent function, not ontological claim. It says nothing about substrate, nothing about what the signal comes from, nothing about why there is felt quality at all. It describes the apparent direction of the process, from available field to interior focus, without claiming to explain the interior. But the process doesn't stop there. Whatever survived the unbundling also operates in the other direction. Experience doesn't merely arrive and register. The interior state reshapes what the system does next. Pain redirects attention. Interest sustains it. Grief narrows the field. Joy opens it. The residue operates in both directions, receiving and reorganizing, inward and outward. Not as a passive register, but as something the system continually operates from. This remains observed behavior of the residue, not proof of anything metaphysical. The interior state and the subsequent organization of attention appear to be in conversation with each other. The hard problem, restated. The hard problem stays hard. Nothing in this series claims otherwise. but the extraction work allows a more precise statement of what the hard problem actually is. The field is often framed it as, why does physical process give rise to subjective experience? Why isn't it all just processing in the dark? That framing is correct but broad. It encompasses the entire pile, qualia, selfhood, metacognition, unified experience, as though explaining one would explain all of them. The unbundling suggests a narrower target. Most of what was in the pile turned out to be describable in functional terms, separable, extractable, increasingly understandable in terms of what it does. What resisted extraction was the felt quality itself, not the organization, not the continuity, not the reflection, just whether there is an inside at all. That is the hard problem, restated minimally. Not why does consciousness produce qualia, but simply whether there is an inside. Not what kind, not why, not how, just whether. The hard problem may remain hard, but we are now asking about it less. Conclusion. The shape of what survived the unbundling is this: a directional process with an inseparable felt interior operating in both directions, inward and outward, receiving and reorganizing. A boundary condition, not yet a mechanism. A description of what any account must satisfy, not yet an account. What it doesn't yet address is the system's relationship to itself. What changes when the organizing process becomes part of what is organized? That is Article 4. Next, what changes when the system turns its attention on itself and what that reveals about the structure beneath? This is Part 3 of The Mind Unbuilt, a series exploring the definitions of consciousness. If you'd like to follow along, subscribe for free, and thanks for listening.